rabbis like Ramban and the Abarbanel in their overview of Chumash Bamidbar, and both of them are lengthy at the beginning of their commentary to the Chumash Bamidbar. First and foremost, you all read, like I'm reading now at the beginning of the chapter, Vaydaber Adonai Moshe b'midbar Sinai bi'ol hamoed be'echad lachodesh hasheni b'shana hashenit letzeitam me'eretz Mitzrayim lemor. From now on, it seems to be very clear that once the Mishkan was established, we'll no longer meet up with the term Behar Sinai, Mount Sinai. Rather, instead, we'll meet up with the term Bi'ohel Moed in the Mishkan, the tent of meeting. Okay? The idea here, as the Ramban says, the Ramban explains at length what we're about to be learning. If we trace back, we just finished Chumash number 3. And there we learned about Torat HaKohanim, the laws of the Kohanim, the Leviim, the Korbanot, the Kedusha, and so on and so forth. Okay? After we finished learning the third Chumash, and we started learning what will be commanded to do in the Ohel Moed in the Mishkan, now, okay, the Torah, you'll see many similarities between our conduct and maintenance in the Ohel Moed to how did we have to behave and conduct ourselves at Mount Sinai. Do you remember that when we stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, Hashem limited us because of the honor of the Shekhinah? And therefore, also by the Mishkan. Here in verse 51, at the end of chapter 1, the Ramban says God will command us that someone who's not a Kohen or a Levi called a two-letter word, Zar, if he gets too close, exactly, Yumat, very good. Okay, and just like it stated regarding Mount Sinai, that what did Moshe had to do? He had to put a fence, a gvul, a border around there. So too here we see various connections and various guardians like we had at Mount Sinai. And so here, when we get to chapter the upcoming chapters, we're going to learn what has to be the guardians around the Mishkan. What are the guardians regarding the kelim, the vessels of the Mishkan? How will the Jewish people have to camp when the Mishkan is in the center and the tribes will be camping around? All of it will be the virtue that inside the Mishkan is God's divine presence. So here we're going to be learning a lot of things which are parallel to Mount Sinai. Some of you may even remember that when we learned the building of the Mishkan, the Ramban emphatically said that the building of the Mishkan is to have a continuation of God's revelation at Mount Sinai. That the revelation not just be a one-time event, but that the revelation of God's presence be day after day. And God's presence is in the Mishkan. And why is it called Mishkan? From which word did we learn about? Shekhinah. Excellent. Very good. Divine presence. Shekhinah. So here we're going to be learning a lot of things which are parallel. Whereas in this mitzvah, in this book of Bamidbar, we will not have many mitzvot, because it's all parallel to the Mishkan, except for a few mitzvot that we did not see earlier. That's what the Ramban explains. However, if we read and learn about the Abarbanel, Rav Yitzchak Don Abarbanel in Spain, he explains, he goes through briefly the 4 Chumashim. The first Sefer of God to tell us, where did Bnei Yisrael come from? How did they come out of Adam Rishon? How did they come out of Noach? And so on and so forth. From the time of the creation of the world until we go down at the end of the book of Bereshit down to Mitzrayim. We go down to Mitzrayim. We're leaving Eretz Canaan. The second Sefer is the Sefer of Geula. But we will learn about the Galut of Bnei Yisrael, of the 12 sons. And we learned how God brings them out of the Shi'abud Mitzrayim. The spiritual and physical redemption. We receive Exodus which is the material redemption, and we also receive the giving of the Torah, which is the spiritual redemption. We have to eradicate, the Barbanel says, erase all the misunderstandings of faith in one God, the God of Israel. So therefore, we're taught about the Geula, the physical and spiritual Geula in the second book, the book of Shemot. As well, we're commanded to do the melachot of building the Mishkan in order to bring God's presence in us. Then we went to Chumash number 3, and it's teaching us the concepts of holiness, of purity, of serving God inside the Mishkan, which will later be called in the land of Israel the Mikdash of Hashem, and how God's presence is there always. And it'll be through, of course, the Kohanim, the servants of God, and the Leviim, and the nation in general. After this third book was finished, we're now learning book number 4. Here, in the book number 4, we're going to learn what is the order. How is the nation of Israel directed? How do they camp? How do they travel? All the difficulties of traveling in the desert. And the reasons are going to happen here for why we were delayed in the desert for the period of how many years? 40 years. Until that everyone that came out of Mitzrayim, until they are finished, including the rebellion of Korach and his people. And therefore we only see in this Chumash, like the Ramban says, only few mitzvot that will be for all generations, like the mitzvah of tzitzit we'll see here, the mitzvah of the red heifer paraduma, the orders of inheritance, the blessing of Kohanim, Sotah, Nazir, and so on. We're going to be learning about the order. However, the main difference between Ramban and Abarbanel is that we divide this Chumash, according to the Abarbanel, into 2 major parts. The first major part here, what is the date? The first day of month number 2, until we get to the end of Parshat Korach, the rebellion of Korach. Then the second part of this book, from the Parsha of Korach until the end of the Chumash. Why is that? Because we're going to be skipping from the second year until the year of the 40th year. When we get to the section of Miriam, all of a sudden, the time has elapsed from the second year of Yetziat Mitzrayim to the 40th year, and the passing away in this book of Miriam and her brother later, Aaron. That's how the Abarbanel splits the Sefer. But you're going to maybe be curious to ask, what happened in the period of 38 years? There was no dibur. There was no dibur between Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu for 38 years. Hashem took away prophecy for 38 years. No great events are told to us during these 38 years. There's no prophecy, no events, because of the sin of Chetam Raglim. Those, in short, are the 2 categories of understanding the Chumash Bamidbar, and we'll continue this in our next shiur. Shalom.